Hello, welcome to Normal Island Live. My name is Alyssa Gucci. Happy Friday. Sorry for the slight false start there. If you something odd, just pretend it didn't happen. It's fine. As it is Friday, as always, we are joined by the wonderful Curtis Daly. Hello, how are
Hello,
you?
hello. I'll explain the false start. We don't have a producer again because loads of people on holiday, so I'm producing
Hmm.
whilst also being your guest.
Yeah.
And we had last week's script up on the teleprompter, and I noticed it. I quickly ran over, so it started. And I was like, "Oh my god, you're going to start reading something from last week,
Actually, it was from 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago." Yeah,
And
'cause you were
I
away.
literally didn't even notice. I'd just been reading it out. And like it would just been really awkward. But anyway, it's fine. You saved the day, and we're gonna get cracking with the show. Remember to like the stream, make sure you're subscribed, and if you want to support us, then you can go to turnfmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work. So let's go to our first story. Actor Jamila Jamil has caused a storm, especially among the right wing, with her comments about British people. Criticizing the British Empire on yesterday's podcast, she said this.
So lucky to have been a part of that show. It was so well written, and Megan Amram as well as one of the lead writers on that show, who just wrote the shit out of Tahani. And so, like, together we all crafted her. But I just had to make her more of a bitch. They wanted her to be very sweet because Americans think British people are so sweet, which is crazy because British people are truly the most evil people in history. Like, they are
100.
Thanos. Britain is
100%.
Thanos.
Go to
Like,
a
it is-
museum, guys.
Yeah, they owe 43 trillion to India.
Maybe
alone.
go to Chilton Firehouse and leave there and be like, wait, was that girl mean to me? Like, everyone's mean.
But we colonized the world. Like, it's
Or
like-
just the artifacts in the museums. I'm like, why is that not in Africa?
yeah. So the idea that like she would be this sweet, saccharine woman, and so Mike Schur was kind of like, we disagreed. We could have butted heads a little bit about how to play her.
It shouldn't be controversial to say how evil the British Empire was. We killed 100 million Indians between 1880 and 1920, more than the Soviet Union, North Korea, and China under Mao combined. Yet this has upset the right wing because everything seems to upset them.
Yeah, they're lying out of whether it's out of ignorance or willful blindness, or whether they're just being disingenuous. You can be generous on that front. Imagine saying that the British people are the most evil in history. What is she saying? That we're worse than Nazi Germany in the extermination of Jews, homosexuals, the disabled, gypsies, Poles, and Slavs and others? Worse than Stalinist Russia with millions dying there, not to mention the Holodomor in Ukraine? Worse than Chairman Mao in China? Worse than the Belgians in the Congo, or indeed, of course, the non-European empires that committed cannibalism, human sacrifice, the Mughal Empire in India, where millions of Hindus and Sikhs were killed by their Muslim overlords. And this goes far wider than this cretinous woman.
Brendan O'Neill wrote an entire piece about her in The Spectator, but these two paragraphs were interesting. We are witnessing the revenge of the sensible. After years of top down, haughty groaning over Britain's history, its bloodstained flag, and its horrible people, normies are starting to say, nah. That's what all the flag raising, that's what all the flag raising was about last summer. It was the people striking back against the luxury self-loathing of their supposed betters. It was a working class rejection of the elite culture of shame. It really is a class divide. You know you're in a working class part of Britain when you see Union flags fluttering, and you know you've crossed back into hipster or leafy territory when the eyesore pride flag appears, or worse, the ghastly Palestine flag. Imagine hating on the colonialist British flag even as you wave a flag under which more than 1,000 Jews were butchered not even 3 years ago. Brendan O'Neill managed to insert his attack on Palestine in there, whilst claiming that patriotism is a working class virtue. But this also speaks to a broader issue. O'Neill is correct that it's certainly harder to say these sort of comments Jamila made when it was a decade ago, but that is due to the fact that the debate has moved to the right. It doesn't mean that criticizing the empire is any less correct. Curtis, what do you make of this story? Because on one hand, she's not incorrect, but also I can kind of understand why people are offended by this because we are, as British people, probably centering ourselves in that conversation. Um, you know. like to think we're not evil, but maybe we are. What do you make of
Maybe we are. Maybe we are. I'm gonna respond to Brendan's comments before I talk about Jamila Jamil. What a fascinating article that was. There's so much to unpack here. So let's look at what he said about Palestine. Really incredible what he's saying there, because he's trying to push this idea that there is a hypocritical nature to being anti-imperialist and criticizing the British Empire, but supporting Palestine. First of all, Palestine isn't even a state, and they're facing not just a genocide, but the those that are committing the genocide, Israel, are a settler colonial state. So supporting Palestine is the anti-colonial position. So it's not hypocritical. Obviously, he's trying to say that thousands of Jews were murdered just 3 years ago under the Palestinian flag. We don't need to go into this again. We know the history of Israel-Palestine. We know that October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum, so I don't need to go through that again. But crazy how we had to sort of insert that in there. What I find most interesting from Brendan O'Neill, and it's not just him, lots of people in the legacy media do this, is quite patronizing to the working class, because he's trying to say that elitism and anti-elitism is based on culture, on your social views and vibes. No. What determines someone as working class is your relationship to production. It's how much power you have, right? It's nothing to do with the fact that, oh, I'm a bit reactionary in my social issues, or that I love the flag. And yet Brendan O'Neill's trying to say, well, that is why last summer we had loads of people raise their flags, because it was a rejection of elitist mindset. That's an insane thing to say, because actually patriotism and subservience to the state is the most elitist thing you can do. I mean, before capitalism, we lived under feudalism of kings and queens. And what was the role of the peasant class? It was to serve, bend the knee, and have complete loyalty to the king and queen, often under banner of the flag. So to say that actually being patriotic is counter-revolutionary or revolutionary to the established order of elitist woke politics is absolutely insane, and it's completely backwards. Because, of course, when we lived under feudalism, we tried to tell people that actually, you must serve the king, you must serve the British state, or it wasn't really a state back then, but the realm, okay? So there's nothing more elite than technically being a patriot to the British state. Now, of course, today, people have their different ideas of patriotism. I think people might criticize me for bringing up this term, progressive patriotism. But I would say, to me anyway, being patriotic is willing to criticize this country and when it does bad things. Not because I want to forever moan about Britain and the British Empire, because I want it to be better. Now, if we were to endlessly bend the knee to the British state and just being blindly patriotic, then this country's never going to improve. So we criticize it to make it better. So Brendan O'Neill was trying to basically say that Jamila Jamil actually has the elitist view because she criticized Britain. Now let's talk about Jamila Jamil's comments. I was actually messaged from a GB News producer, and they said, do you want to come on and talk about this? And I didn't watch the video. I just Googled her comments, and I was like, because they wanted someone to defend her. And I was like, I actually don't agree with her, so there's no point me coming on. But today I actually watched the clip, and my God, she's basically making a joke. Like, obviously the point she is making is that the British Empire was largely evil, and it was. And you have British right-wingers trying to downplay the atrocities of the British Empire when it was terrible. We did awful things. We committed genocide. We committed famine. In fact, ironically, that clip of the person on Talk TV who called her a cretin said that, Stalin killed more people. Stalin killed all these people in the Soviet Union. Chairman Mao killed all those people. But the graphic you showed, explained how Britain killed more people than them combined. So we still killed more people. But watching the video, it's clear that it was kind of an offhand comment. She was making a joke. And actually, she spoke about this point for like 30 seconds. It wasn't that she had a whole segment about the British Empire and how backward every British person was. She was talking about a TV character in which as you explained in the podcast, she's British, and the director or producer wants to be really nice, and she was like, "Well, actually, British people are kind of evil. Let's make her a bit of a bitch." Like it was an offhanded comment, and I just think once again the right wing are having a huge meltdown. I mean, why is Talk TV, GB News talking about this when she just did it on a random podcast? Like, why are they bringing this up? It's not important. But of course, it's more cultural stuff. So I just think, once again, I've said this point so many times, that everything the right wing accuses the left of is exactly what the right wing is. It's pure projection. It's fragile. It's being a crybaby, being a snowflake. She made a little joke, and that was it. I'm not offended. I just think if you're someone who actually has things that really matter to you, you shouldn't give it a second thought.
I don't really think I've got much more to add there. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. And looking at the comments, I think a lot of
Mm,
people also feel very similarly. I think Jamila Jamil is, well, absolutely fab, to be completely honest with
yeah,
you. She's stunning, gorgeous, hilarious, and also has really great politics and is just so
yeah.
intelligent. Like anytime I ever listen to anything that she ever says, I'm just like, wow, I want to be you when I grow up.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, before I watched that clip and I just saw what was reported about her,
Hmm.
right? I was ready to criticize her because ultimately we know the issue isn't with people, it's with systems, it's with imperialism. Like, British people are not inherently evil.
No,
Um, we're no more evil than anyone else. Ultimately, human beings have the capacity to be good and bad. But
100%.
but of course, when it comes to systems of imperialism, that's that's the evil. So there would be many people during that time, British people, who'd be like, "What we're doing is wrong." So of course, if I were to isolate her comments and where she said, "Oh, British people are the most evil people in the world," if we were to take that at face value, then of course I criticize that because it isn't. It's imperialism, it's systems of power, it's global capitalism. And often, global capitalism doesn't just turn on the world, it turns on itself. So British people are victims of imperialism and global capitalism because the capitalists in charge, right, aren't like, "Oh, we love British people, we're taking care of them." No, they exploit us too. So it's, of course, it's not like nations or people versus other people, it's systems, right? But I almost feel ridiculous trying to like even unpack her comments
Mm.
because when you see the
The
context in which she
context.
said it in, she said it as a joke. "Oh, British people are the most evil people in the world, the British Empire." Like it wasn't that serious. And
No.
again, the right wing are just having a meltdown because they have to. It gets views, it gets clicks, and ultimately, like, Talk TV and GB News wouldn't exist without outrage culture. They might actually have to talk about the climate
Mm.
crisis or growing levels of inequality or food banks. They can't talk about that because their billionaire backers don't want you to talk about that. So this is their like real red meat stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of people eat that shit up.
But also right wingers do love to be offended by
Yeah,
everything.
they are.
Um, and I think they also are just so obsessed with this idea of patriotism
Mm,
that any criticism of the British government or colonialism or British Empire history, etc., just comes almost back to like, I don't know, just a general criticism of us as a
yeah.
nation, and there's no like learning from anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, oh, well, if you're going to criticize anything about Britain in the whole history of Britain as a nation since the beginning of time, then you're
Mm.
unpatriotic and you don't love your country and blah blah blah. Stop the boats,
But
deport people.
yeah,
Like, do you know,
stop the boats, right? Patriots, stop
that's
the
what
boats.
that's what it will
But
like
they
come back
people
round
people
to.
personalize it, right? They feel personally offended, and that's a very deliberate thing from the British media class and the British state is to try and they're very successful at this, by the way, is to tie criticisms of the British state with attacking your fellow countrymen. They are two separate things, but the political establishment have deliberately merged those two things because ultimately those in power do not want you criticizing the British state. They don't want you criticizing our foreign policy, for example. And there are moves from right wing parties, politicians. I mean, Kemi Badenoch came out and said that, like, we need our children to be more proud of our nation. Like, there are moves from right wingers that want to indoctrinate our kids to never question the British state. They want to create subordinate subjects. So when you criticize the British state, which should be criticized, the media class will automatically say, do you know what they're doing? They're criticizing you and your way of life. And that's where a lot of racism comes from. You see a lot of online comments from Jameela Jamil like, well, she's brown or she's not even British, she should leave. When it's not a personal attack. In fact, like, people need to understand that actually ordinary British people and ordinary working class people are separate from those in power. And we're criticizing those in power and the state apparatus, not individual people. But of course, it doesn't serve the interests of the oligarchs and the billionaire class if we were to separate the two. So they merge them together.
Well, really well put. But I think we're going to move on to our second story. A campaign of 120 millionaires, which includes Gary Lineker, has called on the government to tax the rich more, and the right wing, again, are having a meltdown.
More than 120 millionaires, including Gary Lineker, Brian Eno and Gary Stevenson, have signed an open letter urging Prime Minister Andy Burnham to tax their wealth. The campaign, called Proud to Pay, says a 2% tax on wealth over £10 million could raise £24 billion a year. The message to the Prime Minister is a simple one. They say, we want you to tax us because we can afford it.
You can almost predict what the right wing have said in response. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said this. Gary Lineker is very welcome to pay more tax. He can write a cheque to the Treasury. No one is stopping him. Former Top Gear presenter James May made the same argument on LBC.
Can I ask you about one of your fellow now ex-BBCers, Gary Lineker, who has suggested today that he would like to pay more tax. He thinks that millionaires should be taxed more by this new government. Would you agree with him?
No.
Why?
I already pay loads of tax. Am I supposed to volunteer to pay some more?
Well, you can do, of course. You can pay whatever you like to HMRC.
You absolutely can. You could pay your whole income to HMRC if you like. And those people who say, I'd gladly pay an extra 2% tax if it went to the homeless or military veterans or the disabled or whatever, well, there are plenty of people who will take that extra 2% from you if you wish to donate it.
But if, we're going to need money from somewhere, I guess if it's not taxing and it's not borrowing, it's growing the economy.
Yes. There's your rabid capitalism again.
There he is again.
Right-wing commentator Konstantin Kissin thinks more taxes is virtue signalling. Because they don't want to pay more tax, they want to virtue signal and force other people to pay more tax. I don't think Kissin realizes that those calling for higher taxes would also be paying more, not just other people. But once again, the right wing and media elite are out of touch with the British people. Last year, a poll conducted by YouGov showed that 75% of people supported a 2% wealth tax above £10 million and only 13% opposed. The truth is, whatever your views on certain taxes, whether you think they are viable or not, people want to see the enormous wealth gap reduced. Curtis, I know this is a policy that you do support, but you kind of think it should go further. What do you make of Gary Lineker and others? I mean, there was quite a few millionaires that have kind of come out in support of this, but at the same time, does Kemi Badenoch and James May make a point that they can just give more if they want to?
I mean, yes, they can just give more to HMRC if they want to, but that's not how taxes work or the social contract works. I tell you what, every single year there's always a debate about taxes, and there's always a debate about the rich paying more taxes. And it is the most right-wing, low IQ slop reply when you hear, well, you can donate more to HMRC. It's coordinated. Kemi Badenoch said it, so many right-wingers said it. It's get a new line. You hear that all of the time, right? And it's have more imagination, be more creative with your so-called rebuttals. Of course, it's a ridiculous response because taxes are not philanthropy. Of course, many rich people give to charity. A lot of multi-millionaires and billionaires and trillionaires now do give to charity, and they try and save on taxes, then give to charity. They think that's doing their bit. But as I believe Clement Attlee said, charity is the cold, hard reality of a failed system. Apologies if it wasn't Clement Attlee, but the point stands, which is that if you have charity, that means the political and economic system has not worked. Homelessness is a choice. Poverty is a choice. The rise in food banks is a political choice. So, yes, Gary Lineker, Gary Stevenson, and many others can donate more money to the Treasury, but individuals giving more money to the Treasury will not make a single bit of difference. The point of calling for higher taxes is we need a lot more money. And to have, to respond to a systemic problem, which is gross levels of inequality, like homelessness, that's a systemic thing, with a non-systemic answer by saying just volunteer your money is ridiculous, right? Issues that have come from the system require systemic solutions. And a systemic solution is that everyone in that certain bracket pays more, okay? Otherwise, Gary Lineker will be saying, give more to charity. And what does that do? What does that prove? Nothing. The point is we need more taxes on the wealthiest. Now, you asked me whether I support wealth tax. I do support a wealth tax, but I have problems with it. Not necessarily the nature of the wealth tax itself, but the proposals. A 2% wealth tax on £10 million or more won't do anything. Broadly, because the point of taxes isn't necessarily to bring in money to the Treasury. It's to change behaviour. It's to reduce inequality. I don't need to go on about my MMT again, that taxes don't fund public spending. The Bank of England does, and taxes is used to control inflation, right? But yeah, we don't need to tax people more to bring in more money. Of course, we do need to bring in more money when, let's say we spend more money and we don't tax it back. Obviously, inflation will go up. Again, separate economic conversation. But ultimately, we need to have higher tax on the wealthy to reduce inequality because the super wealthy have so much power. And money equals power. Wealth equals power. We don't live in a democratic system when you've got a few elites, a handful of billionaires that have far more political power than you and I. So billionaires shouldn't exist. End of. So that's why my criticism of the wealth tax is it won't actually do what it needs to be done. However, I understand why they're starting from a 2% wealth tax. It's because you need to change the Overton window. You need to change the political conversation. I mean, no one, absolutely no one, apart from the handful of Marxists, would back a 75% tax on those earning more than 10 million or who have wealth over that at that point. You have to bring people with you. And I think a small 2% wealth tax is a start. But ultimately, it is about reducing inequality. And as Gary Stevenson says, this isn't even a moral thing, it's a mathematical thing. The economy is suffering because of gross levels of inequality. So when I say tax the rich, when he says tax the rich, it's not about saying I'm really envious, especially when the 120 millionaires and patriotic millionaires are millionaires themselves. They've got nothing to be envious of. They're rich themselves. But of course, when you're rich and you call for higher taxes, they call you a hypocrite. When you're poor and you call for higher taxes, they say you're envious, right? It's the same shit you hear over and over again, right? But I'm not even coming at it from a moral angle. I'm coming at it from a point that when the richest get richer and richer and richer, they buy everything. They own everything. Ordinary people can't get on the housing ladder because house prices are astronomical. Like the ordinary working or middle-class person can't meaningfully contribute to the economy because it's been hoarded by the billionaire class. And that wealth needs to be shared. But when people have so much money, so much wealth and power, then ultimately you have a velocity effect in which the inequality explodes, right? Inequality never is finite, right? It goes up and down, right? But it only goes down with intervention from government policies. And when the government takes a hands-off approach, it explodes. You've got Daniel Priestley, who seems to think that inequality hasn't increased over time. It absolutely has. I mean, you don't even need an academic look at society. You can see that food banks have increased, and we've got the world's first trillionaire. Like, people need to understand that people's purchasing power is getting worse. You don't just look at things in nominal terms. You don't say, oh, well, wages are higher. Yeah, but how far does your pound stretch? That's the point, right? Your wages might go up, but house prices have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, okay? So it's really important to reduce inequality. And I'm very glad that people like Gary Lineker, Gary Stevenson, and people in patriotic millionaires are calling this out because we absolutely need it. And once again, the right wing and the political media class are so out of touch. Literally 75% of people support a wealth tax. So it's more right-wing slop.
Do you think that now it does appear that there are more wealthy people, millionaires, people in the spotlight, etc., like Gary Lineker, Gary Stevenson, etc., etc., that are backing this. If more come on board, do you think it is likely that the government are gonna kind of take note and listen and actually act upon it, or do you kind of think I
I
don't know, it's
don't.
just gonna
I
be a group
well,
of wealthy people that are kind of supporting something, but yeah, nothing actually really ends up happening.
I do think there are probably those in Andy Burnham's cabinet, probably Andy Burnham himself, who do think that inequality needs to be addressed. Um, I don't doubt that Andy Burnham wants to see that, but does he have the political strength or even the backbone to come out and support wealth tax? I don't know. I mean, the first 2 years of Keir Starmer's premiership, they never even uh, gave credence to the idea of a wealth tax. So it's not necessarily about whether Andy Burnham or his government thinks that inequality needs to be addressed. I think they do, but are they going to make that fight? Are they going to stand up and say we need a wealth tax? And I don't think they will. Look, Andy Burnham. It hasn't even been a week since he's been prime minister, so people know my politics. People know my views on Andy Burnham. People know that I'm still most likely going to be voting for the Green Party because I think a strong Green Party is still important in the context of Andy Burnham. In fact, even more important. But I'm not going to, I'm going to give Andy Burnham time, of course. But do I expect he's going to come out with a wealth tax? I don't think so. So, but it doesn't matter. Well, no, it does matter. But it's not just going to be a bunch of rich people, speaking to themselves. That's what campaigning is, right? Getting on the airwaves, making this an issue of focus. Like, stop the boats. No one spoke about stop the boats 10 years ago. And then you had political campaigners say stop the boats. And then it made its way to the top. And then you had Rishi Sunak with a sign saying stop the boats. And then you had Keir Starmer saying they'd stop the boats. And guess what? They pretty much stopped the boats. So whether Burnham adopts it or not, it's important to keep pushing for this. It's important for us to keep pushing for wealth taxes. Now, again, my favorite tax, I would say, is a land value tax. It's far better than a wealth tax. Again, I'm not opposed to wealth tax, but I think land value taxes are far better. But the agenda of taxing the rich and reducing inequality is number one, and people support it. And it's only a matter of time that a government is going to adopt it. Is it going to happen in the next year or two? I don't know.
Let's move on to our next story. But before we do, it's 2026, and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left. We want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put us on the map. We are leveling up with having a part-time studio with guests in person, but we want officially to have our own space and for our contributors to be paid for the work that we do. Your support over the years has been amazing, and we are ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations, so if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. Thank you. You can also become a YouTube member from 99p. Right, so let's move on to our final story. Andy Burnham has announced he will be reintroducing the £2 bus fare cap after Keir Starmer increased it to £3, a policy that's hard to argue against, and it's part of Burnham's immediate cost of living relief package. Was it Bodger? Is that what we said? Sarah Bodger told her story to the BBC. She said that the cap would save her £500 a year as she travels 4 hours daily on the bus. For some people, this cap will make a huge difference. Yet somehow people are moaning, obviously. Well, we're glad for you. I personally haven't got on a bus for 20 years and I'm a working person. How can I save £500 a year? One fucking person. What about the rest of us who don't travel on buses? Okay, fine, that's just Twitter comments. Yeah, the BBC also published this from a Mark Tate. This is great if you use the bus, but no good for those who drive. Yet again, the working class person is left out. Of course, it's hard to gauge how widespread this sentiment is, but being British, we have a good idea that many people share this, quite frankly, selfish viewpoint. Also, working class people get the bus. It's not just working class people who drive. Now, thankfully, the majority of people do support the policy. A total of 83% of people support a £2 cap. And we can see it's broken down by political parties. 90% of Green voters back it. Looking at reform, 74% back the policy. Even among Tory voters, you have 77% in support. However, the policy is broken down by age. Not everyone backs it. The only age cohort where the majority oppose the policy is the over 65s. They are also the only age bracket who get a free bus pass. Curtis, I think the biggest thing for me on this story is people being so negative about it. And it's this, like, we talk about this quite a lot, this crab mentality of, well, if I don't get any type of good thing out of it, then why should anybody else? And also I think it's very narrow-minded of people to say that, oh, look, once again, nothing for drivers, nothing for road users, da, 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 da. Well, maybe that's to come. But you got to start somewhere, and Andy Burnham has said he wants to start with £2 bus fare cap. So let's take your thoughts on this story.
We do always have that conversation about crab mentality, and that permeates British society a lot, doesn't it? The idea that someone else can't get something, or rather, if I haven't got something, I want to make sure that someone else doesn't have it, rather than be happy for that person. I saw a TikTok of, I think the creator is Dr. J. Edwards. I can't remember. He's got long hair. Apologize if I've forgotten your name, but I wanted to amplify what he said because it was really interesting what he said. He said that typically in societies, older people are revered. You respect your elders. But it's a two-way thing because your elders part ways with their wisdom, opportunity, and it's a cyclical thing, right? You know, older people will provide and then you provide for them. And these days, younger people don't really respect their elders for a good reason. And he says, basically, this particular boomer generation is incredibly selfish. And I agree with him. Now, before we get some hate comments from people, I'm not saying that older people by nature are selfish. That's a misunderstanding of my argument. I'm saying this particular generation, the boomer generation, are just selfish. And I can say that because poll after poll after poll proves me right. That poll you just showed, it had the 65s and over, the only age cohort where the majority do not support a £2 cap. There was another poll that said, should, I think it was like 18 to 24-year-olds, should they get free buses? You know, a lot of these people are going to be students or only working part-time, gives them a bit of relief, right? Because when you get to 24, between 24 and 55, 60, you're working full-time typically, right? So when you're older, you ain't got a lot of money, and when you're younger, you ain't got a lot of money. That makes sense to me. I would like to see free bus passes across the board, but to me, the next step should be, well, I think it should be like 15 to 20, right? Again, every age cohort supported it. The only age cohort who didn't support it were over 65s. And who are the only age cohort who get free bus passes? The over 65s. Now, why do we have this phenomenon? Why do we have basically everyone aged 18 to 64 have pretty good opinions and then 65 above don't? One, because they grew up in the 80s or 70s, and I do think that Thatcherite mindset really got in there. But number two, our economy is so geared towards wealth and asset hoarding that older people who rely on their assets to live are going to have that mindset. Look, working people, we are the ones that pay the taxes. Older people don't. Now, I think there's people can misconstrue like what a pension means. People seem to think, oh, you pay into the pension pot your entire life and then you take out. It's not how pensions work. It's so frustrating to see that misinformation, right? Pensions, there's no pot for a pension. You pay into it and then you collect it at when you retire. Okay, there's no specific pot. Pensions are paid for those who are working. So me and you are currently going to work. Our taxes are going on public services and they're paying for the pension, right? You're future loading it. So pensioners who are currently taking the pension, when they were working, they were paying the pension for their elders. That's how it works, right? So if we were to stop paying taxes, all of us, all working age people stop paying taxes, there would be no pension for older people to claim. So that's really important. So I think we should have policies that geared towards younger people too. I mean, we've got Andy Burnham coming out saying he might increase the tax threshold for pensions, because if you have a state pension, it's close to the threshold where they might start paying taxes. That, along with a triple lock, it's like, what do younger people have? I digress. That's a separate thing because the £2 cap isn't based on age, right? But also, what this says, it says a lot about Keir Starmer. Okay, this is a Conservative policy. It's not a left-wing policy. It's not a progressive policy. It's not a Labour policy. The Conservatives brought in the £2 cap on bus fares, and it was Keir Starmer who came in and raised it to £3. And as much as I have exclaimed so much that the Labour Party is rotten to its core and that a change of leader won't fundamentally change the party or our politics, I do want to say that you can see like how priorities have immediately shifted from Keir Starmer to Andy Burnham. Now, Andy, again, I'm not a Labour supporter. Andy Burnham hasn't convinced me to go back to the Labour Party. I'm a Green guy. You know, I'm not a member of any party, so I don't support any political party. But like, I'm mostly aligned with the Greens. Okay, but I do have to say, Andy Burnham in the first couple of days as Prime Minister is doing all the right things. He's hitting the right notes because he's immediately gone to cost of living, but he's also said, look, there's going to be long-term strategies we want to reduce the cost of living, but there's going to be some short-term things that, you know, they're not groundbreaking, but something tangible. And he's done that. He said, I'm going to cut taxes on your bills, and I'm going to keep or reintroduce the £2 cap. Again, these don't change everyone's lives. I think the £2 cap will, obviously, that Sarah Bodger, that changed her life quite a lot. But like, tangibly, does that change millions of people's lives? No. But it's good political communication because he's basically saying, look, I'm going to change something right now, and here's me doing it. And you just got to think, why did Keir Starmer not do this? Maybe not on this particular policy, but on other policies. Why did he not come in day one and say, look, I'm going to change things. I'm not going to be more competent. I'm going to change people's material conditions. I'm going to do this on day one. Now, Andy Burnham's speech invokes his number 10 speech. He invokes Jeremy Corbyn and said, I'm going to end rough sleeping. Now, whether he does or doesn't, that's another matter. But like, that's very, very good. Again, I'm not a fool. I'm not glazing Andy Burnham, saying he's a savior. I do find it quite strange that some people who have supported the Greens have like really jumped on Labour under Andy Burnham. Like, please still be cautious. But I have to give credit where credit is due. The £2 cap, very good policy. Abominable that Keir Starmer, you know, raised it to £3. And Andy Burnham communication style is doing everything that Keir Starmer hasn't done.
Yeah, I think there's lots of positive signs, but I think it's also sensible to be cautious at the minute because, as you said, he's not even a week in yet, but he's making some good kind of positive changes so far. So I guess it's a kind of watch this space.
I mean, he's also still endorsing war crimes by allowing the US to use our bases for the Iran war.
And I also
LFI is littered across the cabinet. Like, there's so many things that's wrong with him.
And I also suppose the you know, putting the bus fare back to £2, it's not like radical thing.
No,
it's not the most
radical.
radical thing he could have done. And okay, yeah, it needed to have been done because it needed to be reversed from when Keir Starmer raised it. But it's probably not going to make a huge amount of difference. I mean, obviously for that lady, yes, she said it's going to save her £500 a year. That's an amazing amount. For some it might be less, for some it might be more. But yeah.
But it's tangible bread and butter policies immediately. And that's
exactly.
why it's so good.
It's something that he's said he's going to do, and it's happened immediately, and that's a positive.
Because he's said many times he wants to end neoliberalism. I don't believe him, by the way. I think he's got a neoliberal cabinet. But ending neoliberalism after 50 years of neoliberalism will take 10, 15, 20 years, right? So whilst it's a good long-term project to have, you do need day-to-day bread and butter policies. And that is why it's almost an expert move from Andy Burnham. Low bar, though, because it was Keir Starmer that increased it to £3. And again, I'm not tempering my expectations, but I'm merely just seeing from a political strategy point of view, just shows how unbelievably bad Keir Starmer was. And all of us on the left predicted it. We said Keir Starmer was terrible. We could see how awful he was from 2020, I mean, particularly 2021, how bad it was at communicating, and how bad it was at priorities. I mean, Starmer's priority was just basically saying how much of a international statesman he was. I mean, he was just all endless money to Ukraine, and that was he thought that would make him popular. It makes him popular with Germany and Angela Merkel and people around the world. But what about those struggling today? And I think that's something that Andy Burnham gets, which Keir Starmer clearly doesn't. So yeah. Also, in terms of like the selfish response, you know, the person who said like, "Oh well, I drive. That doesn't do anything for me." Typical working class people left out. Working class people get the bus. In fact,
Probably
you're more
more.
likely to get the bus
Yeah.
because you can't afford to run a car. Again, people have working class embedded in their minds based on vibes, right? It's woke left progressive politics by getting on the bus and being eco-conscious, and it's proper salt of the earth working class when I've got my stupid gas guzzling car. And by the way, I'm not attacking people for those that are driving, because one thing I've criticized people on the left and the Green Party is to not shut out people who drive. And Zach Polanski's been very good about saying, if you eat meat and if you drive petrol, like, you're not unwelcome to the Green Party, because ultimately the problem is the big corporations who are polluting this country, and it's about inequality in people's material conditions, which is still, yeah. So I'm not like attacking drivers, but that I'm attacking that particular person who can't understand that like working class people can drive, but they also get on the bus.
And also, it's important to acknowledge that buses in this country, generally speaking, are quite pants. Like they
Terrible.
are, public transport in this
Terrible.
country is also really awful. So for a lot of people, the only option actually is for them to have their own car and to transport themselves, because either they live in rural areas that aren't supported by a decent public transport network, or they're just unreliable, expensive, not nice when you're on them either, like not particularly clean, or, you know, and sometimes they're unsafe. And if you need to, you know, be traveling back late at night from places, you kind of don't want to be getting public transport, especially as a woman and things like that.
Yeah,
So
I completely
there's, you
understand
know,
that.
there's a
But
lot of other reasons why people may and may not get public transport.
we are car mad as a nation.
Yeah.
But that is not, I think that culture comes from exactly what you're saying. Terrible public services and terrible transport.
Yeah.
If you live in rural places, you're forced to drive. And even big cities like Bristol have a privatized bus network. They use First Bus, who are abysmal. They have terrible, terrible buses. They're unclean. They're old. They never turn up, or they're always late. And some routes are not very often, every half an hour, 45 minutes. Other parts of the country have shown where good quality public transport makes a huge difference. Manchester, when Andy Burnham was mayor, he's got really good, the B network, right, the yellow buses. But also Nottingham have a tram system. So you can see how convenient it is. So like, I'm so radicalized by like two things, I think. The things I'm so radicalized by is housing. I want there to be the biggest council house building program we've ever fucking seen. And I want to see the biggest transport network we've ever seen. Every single city has buses, and where they can, has trams. And make it that it's more inconvenient to get in your car. Because ultimately, when you drive to work, you're all angry, pissed off, you're getting angry at everyone else. Road rage is so real. It's expensive.
I fully got cut up by someone this morning. I had some choice words, let me
You
tell
had some
you.
choice words,
I
yeah.
did, yeah.
Unfortunately, they couldn't hear it, so you had to say it yourself.
I
Yeah.
actually said it to my coworker that I was on the phone to. But
Right? But we could alleviate your anger if we had better public transport.
I was going to say something, but no, I won't. It's fine. Like, let's go to comments.
I'm intrigued.
No, I was just thinking, well, I was just being too personal about my own circumstances, in terms of like, the job that I do, I travel a lot for work, so I do need a car. I actually can't get the bus to work because
You can't
I work in
eliminate.
a different.
You can't
location,
eliminate
but
cars.
I'm
Sure.
going off on a tangent.
But I want us to be like, look at beautiful European towns and cities. Yes, there's cars. Yes, some people have to drive. Yeah, I get it. Like, your line of work, you have to drive. I get it.
Yeah.
But for so many people who don't live far off the city, who live in the city,
Well,
let's have a great.
Yeah, I
great
think city
public transport network.
centers 100%, but I also Um, I also do like the idea of is it walk-in
Absolutely.
cities
Walkable
or
cities.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
I love it.
100%. Like we live in Leeds. I quite like the fact that we can just go out on a weekend
Mm.
and we've got a lot on our doorstep, whether it's we're walking distance from a supermarket, we can go to a bar or a restaurant or a coffee shop or the shops or whatever it is. I like that, there's a doctor's surgery actually not that far away from us either. And like all those things I think are
Mm.
actually very positive. And it also baffles my mind why people think that that's a crazy
Well, the right wing is
policy.
saying that it's communism. It's 15-minute cities. They're trying to control you. It's like, oh my god.
I don't know. But anyway,
Neoliberalism has really rotted people's brain. To say.
on that note, should we go
Yeah.
to
Okay.
some comments?
So you've been starring a lot of
I've been
comments, haven't
starring
you?
some comments. I don't know if you've starred any or
I
not, to be
haven't.
honest. But
I've
okay, well,
speaking and doing the.
if the comments are I mean, I've started a few that I just kind of found funny, and also some that I
Yeah.
thought maybe we could
Should we do the
talk
super chats
about. Yeah,
first?
you go ahead and do
You
super
want me? Okay.
chats.
Michael with a turn left membership. Thank you so much, Michael. I don't know which camera should we be looking at. Let's do the wide shot. See, if we had a producer, like that could be done for us. Thank you, Michael. Always appreciate it. Always showing up. I actually point at the camera. I'm looking
Oh
at
my
you.
God.
Victoria VA9 received a membership from Michael Terry Regan. Gifted 10 turn left memberships. Thank you so much. That nice guy was one of those. I'm not going to go for everyone who received it, but yeah, it's much appreciated. Specs. Good to see you, Specs, with 5 turn left memberships. It feels strange because I feel like we haven't interacted for a long time, partly because we were away, but also, as people know, there's lots of holidays. So July and August shows are sporadic. We've had to cancel a lot of shows. We've had to put up interviews, and that's still going to continue until August because Callum's away for like 3 weeks. So it feels like I know our shows aren't that regular at the moment. We will return to normality though, like September time.
Definitely, we'll get there.
I saw this earlier. Marriage causes divorce says with the 5 pound super chat. HMRC asked Gary to pay a 4.9 million tax bill because Gary used a partnership called Gary Lineker Media to reduce his taxes. We need to close tax loopholes. Now, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Gary, but I did see a Twitter thread that apparently said that like he was asked to pay the wrong taxes. So I don't know if he was actually lobbying to pay less taxes, but he was overtaxed and then he had to fight something. Regardless, even if he did like lobby to reduce taxes, his own taxes, this isn't a personal matter, is it? I don't particularly care about Gary Lineker and his personal affairs.
Yeah.
It's a systemic thing, and a lot of people have brought up that point, like, "Oh, Gary Lineker tried to get pay less taxes. What a hypocrite!" Fine, he's a hypocrite. Then doesn't mean that the policy of raising taxes on the rich isn't salient. It's trying to individualize and personalize the issue, right? Which is not going to work because 75% of people support wealth taxes. Duck Authority, another £5 super chat. We need high density housing with local amenities. Take a look at the Red Vienna housing model. Yes, and we also, I like what you said about local amenities. We need mass council house building, but we also need community wealth building and community housing. So it's not just owned by the state and councils, but I want to see more community wealth. And you know, that's the true power, right? And you hear a lot of politicians, they always bullshit, but they always say stuff like, I'm here to share power, right? Now, in order to truly share power, you need to share economic power and ownership. Andy Burnham won't do this shit. It's too radical for him. But like, it's not just about using the power of the state to improve people's lives. You know, having council houses is a good thing, but we also need to push community wealth building. We need to have housing in the hands of local people, and no government's going to do that. Like you need a radical politics for that. Some local councils are doing that, but national governments they won't. That's too much power to give away. Okay, let's go to the normal star comments. Top. Thomas J. Wallens, evil is their trigger word. Trigger because they haven't had the chance to be as evil or even more evil, tiny violin for those people. I mean, it's quite fun, isn't it? But like, that's the thing, you know, we can sit here and not be offended by Jamila's comments, right?
It's also, I think evil is a trigger word, and also racist is another trigger word. It's like you don't want to, that obviously nobody wants to be called either of those things or anything else of a similar nature, but we almost can get so tunnel vision on that, on being called a
Mm.
particular thing, though actually we're not analyzing why it was that that word was maybe used to describe somebody in the first place. You know what I mean?
Well, I think people are more offended by being called a racist than being racist.
Yes.
And it's like, you need to just chill out for a second.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
also, there's probably ways the left can communicate that better, though, because when we say you're racist or whatever, like, it's not necessarily that you are a racist, but what you did was racist or
Yeah.
a bit ignorant. Maybe we can be better at communicating that. But like, don't be so offended and fragile. Yeah, but
100%.
that's how the right wing operate. Let's be honest. Saying, Actor Intrepid, the most patriotic act is to recognise what your country's done wrong and call it out truthfully. Exactly. Exactly. Do you want to be a subordinate pupil or subject to the state? We don't, but the media class do. I mean, that guy who went on Talk TV who called Jamil cretin, did you see him? He was literally a colonialist. You could have been in the 1800s. The way he dressed, I mean, he didn't quite have a fucking monocle, but he could have. And the way he was so posh. Like, this guy is probably like
Don't have anything
defending.
against posh people now.
I have, actually. Well spoken and posh are two different things.
Right.
Saying. There's a nice style with my clan. But yeah, like, you could have plucked him out of the 1800s, right? He was a colonialist himself. Poodlefish girl. What's happening in Palestine can be directly traced back to the British Empire. 100%. 100%, of course, the Balfour Declaration in 1948. Like, Israel was literally created by Britain. And Israel is an extension of the British Empire. And it's insane for Brendan O'Neill to try and like bring up 3,000 dead Jews on October 7th. Israelis, not Jews, not all of them are Jewish people, but also like, yeah, I don't need to go into it. We know.
It is
history of
quite
Israel,
mad
Palestine.
how that comment from Jamil, he was able to kind of pivot it into basically anything he wanted.
But ultimately, these people defend it because they are colonialists themselves. They are imperialists. They're like, oh, people like Jamil and the woke left always downplay Britain. And it's like, it's not that you're offended that they're downplaying Britain. It's that you are proud of the British Empire. You are proud, and not necessarily it's Brendan O'Neill specifically, but many people in the political establishment are proud of what we did to Indians and the Irish. And they want that to continue. So it's not that they're offended by some of these comments. They're just like, we don't want you to call it out. They love the imperialism. That's what I think. RS Genji. I don't think we're evil, but I think we're sensitive about British history. We have this idea that if we criticize criticize British Empire's history, we are being anti-British. I mean, that's a really good comment, isn't it? I think it sums it up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it links back to one of the previous comments about learning from our past mistakes and histories and stuff. And it's completely unrealistic there is no single nation on this planet that has never
Has their hands clean.
No, that has never done anything bad to their own people or other countries and nations. And it isn't unpatriotic to point that out and to look back on history with a critical and analytical perspective. It is actually completely necessary to do that so that some of the very awful things that happen don't repeat themselves, which unfortunately doesn't always happen. But it's not being anti-British to be reflective on our history.
It's also not anti-British to understand that Britain has played a unique role in imperialism.
Yeah.
You know, because it would be incorrect to be like, okay, every country's done something wrong. But there's also context to some nations have been occupied, have been on the end of imperialism, and some nations have been the aggressor, have been the imperialist. Like, it is true that if you add up a lot of crimes, Britain in the last 200-300 years were like the worst. Now, people bring up the Holocaust, sure. But also, if you want to do that, there's a current Holocaust happening in Gaza in which Britain is complicit in. So it's also not anti-British to say, well, there is a unique evil in the last 300 years of what the British Empire did. But it doesn't mean that British people are uniquely evil. But let's be honest, Britain did a lot of really bad things more than other people. No country is equal in their crimes. And Britain dominated the world for a very long time. Jamie Alice, the UK establishment has brainwashed people into conflating patriotism with uncritical and fanatical idolization of the monarchy. 100%. I almost feel like that actually, so many in the political establishment desperately want to return to feudalism. They want to return to kings and queens. Democracy's too messy for them because, they want us to be, again, subordinates to the state. And Jamie's right, because I think the establishment have been completely successful in doing that. They've been very successful in conflating the two. And therefore, your average person, like Jamila Jamil's comments, whilst off the cuff and kind of funny, the points about the British Empire are objectively correct, yet they are not popular. When it comes to economic issues, the left have popular ideas. Majority of people watch this show right now, right? Most people will be like, we're anti-British, right? Your average person would disagree with us. Just because that most people would disagree with us on this, though, doesn't mean it's objectively incorrect. It's objectively right. But that's the problem with our education system. Now, the right wing seem to think that we are too harsh on British people, or sorry, the British Empire. When we're not. We don't even teach fucking colonialism. What I remember at history was like Henry VIII. I didn't know anything about British colonialism. I had to learn that shit myself.
Yeah.
It's important that people are taught that. And I think you create more, what's the word I'm looking for? Critical thinking people. Because it's important to challenge power.
If you want to skip over, you don't have to read every single one
Okay.
that I've starred. I can feel myself flagging. So
Flagging, yeah. Straight from work on the show. That's what happens when you're volunteers at the moment. Ollie says a 2% tax on assets over 10 million is pennies. It's insane there is any pushback against this. It's a real please, sir. May I have some more moment? It is, though, isn't it? I mean, imagine saying that a 2% tax on over 10 million is like radical. And there's an entire media storm against it, though. But I do think the reason why they do it is because they're worried about the momentum.
Yeah, if they do this one thing, then it's going to encourage another and another and another.
And then it's communism.
Supposedly.
Sneaky Fish says, I'm skeptical of Burnham, but he's not going to be sufficiently radical if left to his own devices. I suspect he's going to need to be pressured from that. That's kind of where I'm at, right? I think Andy Burnham is obviously improvement from Keir Starmer. I think we're already seeing that. But I really don't like this idea. And I don't think most people on the left are doing it, but some people on the left are like, okay, we just lay down our arms now and just back the Labour Party. Like, in order to keep Burnham where he is, you need a strong left. And I don't think Burnham would have said and done, or even said half the shit he's been saying without Zach Plansky's Green Party. So I think it's actually really important going forward that the Greens sustain support. And there has been talk of that, the Greens are now like collapsed, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. Of course, a little bit of the support has gone down. But if you look at the Manchester mayoral election, it's not Labour and Reform top two and the Greens on like 6%. I'm sure a poll that had the Greens on like 17, 18% might be higher. Like, it's a 3-horse race. So the Greens are still very much in there. And over the next 2 years, there's going to be so many failings from Andy Burnham that is only going to give more support for the Green Party. Michael says, Curtis must be nearing his 60 plus free bus pass anyways. Well, according to the last show, I'm 50 years old. So,
really?
Yeah, someone gave 50 quid.
For your
£1 for every birthday. So apparently I'm 50 years old. So I've got another 10 years to go. Thanks for that. Vicky says, as Helena keeps saying, the fuel duty relief could pay for totally free buses if that was reversed. And that's the thing. When that guy was like, what about us drivers? They got fucking fuel duty. Like, we give people relief on petrol. How do we fund schools? I left ages ago.
As in, like, that mentality.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
I don't get the bus, so...
Oh, you cure cancer. I don't have cancer.
Yeah. Very stupid mindset.
Very, very British. Michael again says, saw someone claim Burnham. They think Burnham will call. I know what you mean. People think that Burnham's going to call an early general election. Hence, we get all these immediate things. Do you think he'd be wise to do that? Call an early election? There's 2 years left.
Um, no, actually, because so I have two things that go through my mind. On one hand, although when we have a general election, I know that we're not voting for the prime minister, we're voting for our local MP, and obviously, as we know, the party with the most MPs ends up running the country, and the leader of that party becomes the PM. But I also think that most people will vote in their mind for the party of the person that they want to be
Mhm.
prime minister. And now that we have a new prime minister who I was going to say technically nobody voted for, that's obviously incorrect because his constituency voted for him. But as a nation, he doesn't necessarily do we know if he has the backing? So on one hand, I'm kind of like, well, Keir Starmer stepped down. So
Mm.
should that, if the prime minister
Mm.
steps down, should that not just trigger a general election? On the other hand, he is the prime minister right now, and I think he does need some time to establish himself and to make some hopefully meaningful and positive changes. And obviously, calling a general election potentially isn't going to give him that opportunity to do so if he loses and a different party came into power. So I actually think he should just wait it out.
I agree. Like, there's obviously a good argument to say there should be a general election because, apart from Makerfield, no one voted for Brandy Burnham. And whilst we do live in a party system, like, how many people actually vote for their local MP? They don't. But what I would say is that people tend to vote for the party over the leader because we don't have a presidential election. And some of the data I have that I think backs it up is that um, Nigel Farage is a deeply, deeply unpopular man, despite the media acting like he's this political hero. He's very unpopular. His personal poll ratings are abysmal. Slightly better than Keir Starmer. Yet Reform are number one in the polls. So it's not always necessarily down to the person. Obviously, that improves your chances. I definitely don't want a general election because we've had so many fucking general elections. From a selfish point of
Yeah.
view, I want the Greens to develop, and I don't think it'll be good. It wouldn't be good timing for the Greens if they were to have a general election now. So I want the next 2 years for them to build.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as well, on a really selfish point of view for Turn Left, I want us to have a general election 2 years where we have an even better setup and proper thing going. Because I know if there's a general election like around the corner, we'll be scrambling to try and create
Yeah, I know
another
what you mean.
8-hour, 12-hour show in 2 years' time. Imagine what we could be. We might have reporters on the street, which is a
We might.
conversation we've been having about if there is a general election, trying to get maybe Callum on the street reporting. But that only becomes more likely in 2 years' time. So from a personal selfish point of view, I definitely want a general election.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also fucking sick of it. I just want someone to get on with it as well. And
Yeah.
I think most people would actually probably back
Yeah, definitely.
that. Okay, I
On
think
that note, yeah,
that's
we're gonna wrap it up.
yes. Let's wrap it
Perfect.
up.
Well, thank you so much for joining me once again on our little Friday shindig that we
Shindig, hot under the
yeah,
lights.
a
Hot under
little
the
bit.
lights.
A little bit, but it's okay. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. As always, remember we go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30 p.m. You've been watching Normal Ireland Live, and I'll see you next time.